Hey guys, how's it going? This is Connelly here and welcome to my studio. So I wanted to put together for you guys a brand new series of video tutorials on music production. The walkthroughs have been great, but they've not allowed me to focus on very specific areas of production and how I make my music. So I'm going to be doing a few of these. The first one, today's video, is about loops and trance percussion, and I'm going to be using Native Instruments Maschine in the main. Which comes bundled with this piece of hardware, but don't worry if you've not got this. I've done some research and you can also do it with Reason's Dr.OctoRex player, Logic's Ultrabeat, Cubase Loopmash, Arturia Spark, and I'm sure there's many other software samplers out there that have this functionality. The video is split up into around 9 parts. We'll go through each stage, with each one getting a little bit more difficult and a little bit more involved. So no matter what your skill level, you should be able to pick up and understand what is going on. And by the end of it, you should be able to pull together a nice selection of trance percussion and loops and build up a good solid rhythm track for your trance production. All right, let's get stuck in. The first thing I'm going to show you is how I used to work with loops, and what I would basically do is browse through my samples folder and import a variety of loops into the session and start manually editing them. The packs I'm using a lot is the Dave Parkinson Trance Essentials bundle from Freshly Squeezed Samples. It's got some really good content in there, but the loops themselves are quite content rich, and what that means is there's quite a lot of samples within each loop. So there's usually a clap, a bit of a kick, some hi-hats, and what I would usually find is I only wanted particular things from that loop, so I'd have to start editing them out. So what I would do is import this into here, blow it up. Even if I just took, say, 2 bars of it, which was that, sounds like this, I would manually go in and start to adjust these slices by cutting it up, adjusting the volumes, for example, and then even go in and manually envelope things like so, to give us that gated sound, that tighter sound we want for trance percussion. And so on and so forth until I had my perfect loop. Now I'm just going to take it back a second. Another way that you could do that is use the LFO tool. And what the LFO tool is a modulation effect by Zephyr that allows you to apply gated effects to various time constraints. And this example, we're going to use 16th notes because that's exactly when each slice of this loop starts. We're going to control the volume, so turn that up. And this is what basically the sound sounds like after it's been applied. And just like an ADSR envelope, you can control the length of the sound of each slice. And this system worked well for a few years for me, but it doesn't offer you the same amount of control as what I'm going to show you guys right now. Okay, so like other samplers, Maschine has a browser, and within this browser you can pick up any sound you like off your computer. For the purpose of this demo, I've already loaded in a kick and a clap. I'll do a different tutorial on a different day for kick design and clap design. These are 2 sounds I've created quite recently, which I really like, and I'm going to use this for the purpose of this demo to build up our percussion. And these sound like this. The only other thing I've got going on in this session is I'm sending some reverb to this group that I've built up just for a bit of vibe. So when we're drawing in some of our percussion later, we can just add a touch of reverb to get us an idea of what it would sound like as a full mix. But I probably won't take that reverb sound over to Pro Tools. I'll probably leave them dry. More on that a bit later on. But the reverb is here on the clap for our reference. So we're going to be working just within this pattern, and I broke this tutorial down into a few steps, and this is part 1. Slicing a simple sample pack loop up and applying an envelope to the slices. Okay, let's go to our browser and let's browse some sample loops in here, and these are some hat loops, and I've not really picked one before to do this with. I'm just going to browse through and see which ones I like. So I'm going to pick that one. It's got some good content in the lower end just to get us going. and it's quite content rich, so I can show you guys how I split this one up. So it automatically loads into Sound 3, and then from there we can close our browser, go to the sample button, and then from here we have either record, where we can record a new sample. We don't need to do that, we've already got one. Edit it, we're not going to do that, but you can if you need to. Truncate, normalize, reverse, fade in and out, etc, etc, etc. But what we want to do is slice. This basically allows us to do a variety of slice modes to split up this loop into the individual steps and then play around with them in our machine pattern. So the mode we want is grid. It automatically picks up the BPM of 138, and we want to set that to slice into 16ths, and then where we want to apply it to is to replace the sound in Sound 3. So we choose replace, and then all you need to do is once it's done that, you can see the different slices there, click apply. Now it's loaded us into the piano roll. Because the loop is 16 sounds long within a bar, in the case of 2 bars, as you can see here, there's 32 steps. What it's done is gives us the piano roll view so we can see each slice like that. What you'll find with a lot of trance loops is that they're just kind of repeated over, say, the length of a quarter bar or an eighth of a bar, and then duplicated over the space of 2 bars. So we might not even need this content up here. But what we're going to do is switch back into our main view. And from here, we can rename this. Let's call it heavy loop, just for example. And you can see here, we've got our slices. Now we can bring this down to just 1 bar because we don't really need to work over a space of 2 bars right now. And let's listen to that, what it sounds like now it's broken up. Okay. That's not too bad to begin with, and what we can do now is go in and show you guys how we adjust the individual slices. So each one of these is a slice from the loop, and we can see down here we've got velocity for each of these MIDI notes here. And dead easily, rather than adjusting the volume of each individual one, we can just hold down Shift, click on one, click on another, click on that, click on that. And if we wanted to, for example, we could reduce the volume of every slice which is happening at the same time as our kicks. And you can see straight away that's a lot easier way of doing that than editing the audio in our Pro Tools sequencer and spending all day adjusting each volume of each slice. You can still do that. You can still go in and have, for example, just the first ones, 1 and 1.3 down. And then if you wanted to make them all linear, just select them again, dead easily. Pull them down. There we go. And then if you wanted to, we could also adjust the volume of these ones. Say we didn't want those ones to be quite as prominent. Just bring those down a little bit. If you wanted to, you could have this type of loop. So you say you wanted the on-beat and off-beat hats. Dead simple, you've done that now. So straight away we've added a bit of groove to a loop which was set in stone, it was audio, it was rendered up, and now we've made it our own. If you wanted to control the velocity of a sound from your controller, the machine hardware, all you need to do is press step, select the pads that you want to control. In this case, this is number 1, 5, 9 and 13, and in the step they are the kick drums, and then you basically just press play and turn the volume down. And that's reducing the amount of velocity of those pads. Now the next thing we can do is add an envelope to that as promised. So in the sampler section, from here, you want to click on that, plugin sampler, sound. You can see that there's a section here for pitch and envelope. And all we need to do is switch on this. We've got an attack, hold and decay envelope, or an attack, decay, sustain, release. And I'll show you what this sounds like. If you wanted to control the envelope from your hardware, you've got the 4 encoders here, which control attack, decay, sustain, and release. In the same way, press play, turn these down, adjust them however you like. So that's sounding pretty tight. Let's hear it with kick and clap. Not a bad starting point. Okay, that's pretty cool, and I'm going to move on now to part 2. Part 2, using the loop from a sample pack at a different tempo, adjusting the tuning and adding some automated effects. Okay, let's jump into our browser again and let's play some of these loops. Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm going to pick that one. So it's automatically loaded into sound number 4. Go into the browser, go into the sample menu, and in here we're in the slice, and we've got grid mode enabled. Slice it into 16ths. Sometimes it picks it up as 70 beats per minute. You want to just make sure that's 140 so it knows the exact tempo. And we want to apply to sound 4 to replace it. Hit apply. And then it brings us back into our piano roll view with a different sample. For example there. And then we want to come out of that and go into our lane view. And we've got our loop, which was 140 beats per minute. And it's now in our session at 138. We just call that a rolling loop. So let's take a listen. Okay, it's pretty good. And what we want to do now is just take this back again just to 1 bar, so we don't need to bother with the second bar. Solo this just by clicking on it and holding control. And then we're going to go into the velocities once again and have a play with these. So there's no kick in this loop. We're going to take down the first sample of each quarter bar and turn it down a little bit. And then once again, let's get that nice trance feel. Maybe we'll just adjust these ones so then the offbeat pops through. Let's turn these down. You can adjust yours however you like. I'm just going to leave that like that for now. And something I wanted to show you guys was the tuning. Now we can go into our envelope, but what I want to look at first is the tuning of it. So if you wanted to do this inside your sequencer, it would be nigh on impossible to do without using something like a sampler, because if you wanted to tune a whole loop up or down, it'd be really, really difficult using just the sequencer. So within here, we've actually got tuning control over the whole loop. But what it's doing is independently tuning each slice. It's not actually like pitch shifting the whole loop because we've already cut it up. So it sounds like this. And then inside the session with the rest of the drums. So yeah, I'm going to leave that at -1. That's just a 1 semitone down. You can adjust it however you like. Say if you had some bass or other sounds in your session and you wanted them to be in tune with your drums, you can use that control and have really smart control over the tuning of the loop. Okay, let's look at our envelope now. Just solo that once more. Pull up our ADSR. That's pretty tight. I'm not going to do too much to that one now because I want to move on to some of the effects. So here we have an effects and filter section. Now within Maschine we can do compression. That kind of undoes what we do with the envelope, so I don't tend to compress loops really if I'm using envelopes to get the dynamics right. We can drive it. Again, kind of undoes what we wanted to do. We've got sample rate reduction. I'll leave a bit of that on because I want to show you in a second, and then bit depth reduction. Doesn't really work for me that, but yeah, you can do that if you like. And it also has a filter section with the usual filter types: low pass, band pass, high pass, and EQ. I want to show you guys a little trick I use with the low pass filter to get a bit more energy in the loop. So we can just set this here for now. We can play around with it in a second, because we can also modulate it either by using an envelope again or using an LFO. So what we're going to do is just assign the LFO to the cutoff. Sounds like this. Speed's not quite right, so let's bring this up to half a bar. It's pretty cool. You can adjust the phase of when the LFO starts, so it moves the sine wave from left to right. I'd advise listening to this with the kick drum to get a feel of the groove. Quite like that, so let's go back over to the filter and maybe turn down the resonance. Straight away we've got ourselves a brand new loop, and it started off as a really full loop, and now we've changed it by reducing its content, add some modulation, and now with everything else together, that's without it. Get the other loop. So you can see we're starting to build up a nice selection of sounds here. Part 3, sampling a drum loop from a different track and making it work in your production at any tempo. So let's say you hear a really cool loop in someone else's track and you want to be a bit cheeky and use it within your own. How do you do that? I'm going to show you guys right now. So what we can do is go to our browser, and for the purpose of this demo, I've already got a track here. I won't preview it because it might play the whole thing, but we've got a track here that we use that I think's got a cool loop at the start, a bit of texture, and I want to use that in my production. But it's a different tempo and it's a full track, so how do we do that? Drag that into Sound 5, close your browser, and head over to the sampling function. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there's this section here called Edit. What we want to do is do this thing called Truncate, which basically takes the sample, which is the whole track at the moment, and just turns it into just an area of where we want to work. So take your endpoint, move it down there, and if you zoom in, you can get a closer view. We can do this a lot more accurately in a moment. Say that there, and a bit fiddly to begin with, but so that's the endpoint. So we want 1, 2, 3, 4, and make sure you just take a little bit more than that. Try and get that as close as you can there. Hit Truncate, and that will give you just that area. Now, because we kind of did like a rough selection there, we want to make sure that we started before the start of the track and ended just after, because it's easier to cut down than it is to put back on. It's really hard to go backwards. So what we're going to do now, we can use this zoom tool, zoom right in, go to the start of that transient, zoom out there, zoom into the end, start of that transient there, and then that should be our loop. Truncate it once more, and that's perfect. Now we've got that loop. Let's have a quick listen to it. So it's got some really nice hits in there that I can hear, but they're not, I think they've got a bit of groove to them, so they're not bang on the beat, and right now we haven't sliced it either. So let's go to slice. We're going to use grid mode again. It's automatically detected that the BPM is 134. We want to set it to 16ths. And before we go ahead and slice this up, what we want to do is just zoom in a little bit on these slices, and it may take you a little while, but it's worth it in the end. And we can basically see that they're not quite starting where the start points are, and that's because there's a bit of groove applied to that. So let's just zoom in. Let's go to there. Take this end point, move that back a bit, move that start point just to there, end out of the way, start just to there. As you can see, a little bit of manual work here, but a lot better than doing it in your sequencer, I believe. There, there. And there we go. So each sample, you can see, has had a little bit of time removed from it, but we're going to envelope it anyway, and we'll probably do away with those kicks anyway. So what we want to do is get this nice rich content in the middle, and then we want to hit apply, and it's going to replace that pattern and should drop us into sound 5. And there we go. Again, giving us the piano roll, and you can see there's quite a little bit of a gap between each slice, and some of them are not quite on the beat, as you can see there and there, and that's because there was a bit of groove applied to it. So let's come out of there, let's highlight these here, and as you can see they're not quite on the beat. If you right click on what you've highlighted, press quantize, it should all snap now to that grid. And we'll play this, although it's sounding a bit messy because the kick drums are still in there. Good texture, but not quite what we're looking for just yet. So let's solo that. And do away with these kick drums completely. So just select them and delete them. And you can hear here, there's a hi-hat here. I don't really want that hat to be there. So what I'll do is get rid of those. Grab those, hold down Alt, copy them across to that location. Now if you actually go over to the piano roll now, you'll see that we've copied that section. So the hi-hat's still down here, but what I've done is I've used a different part of the loop for this section. And it's quite handy really, because you can still access some of those samples. So try look at it as the piano roll plays which slice of the sample you play, but this grid lets you adjust the rhythm. Okay, nearly there. Nice texture. Let's do some enveloping. Sounds pretty chunky already. Let's do some velocity, sorry, not enveloping. That's wicked. And then I'm probably just going to apply a bit of an effect to that. So we're in our sampler, filter, high pass maybe, because it's a bit subby. Very subtle. And there we go. So we basically just took a track which was in 134 beats per minute, loaded it into an instrument called Maschine, cut it up into slices, got rid of some of those slices, adjusted our loop so we only took the ones we wanted to use, taken the velocity down, and there's something I've not even done yet, which is add a envelope. And we did all that within one machine, which if you did that in the sequencer would take you quite a long time, I believe. I mean, the envelope's not doing a great deal in this situation because the loop's actually been shortened quite a bit anyway. It's quite nice. And all together now, sounds like this. And there we go. Just a head up, finishing this part 3 off, I'm just going to apply some reverb to these little loops we've already got. So let's listen to this one. Let's go to here, output, auxiliary, reverb, just a little bit, same again, reverb. Should sound pretty cool now. Alright, that was part 3. Part 4, adding a rolling hat pattern from single shots and using velocity to create a rhythm. Let's go into our browser, and what we're going to look for now for sound 6 is some closed hi-hats to create a rhythm from them. So let's go into our samples folder, let's use this one, and drum hits is already selected, closed hats, let's have a quick listen. I'm going to use that one. It's a bit basic for now, but I'll show you what we're going to do. So it's already loaded in there. Close our browser. Let's rename that tap hat. Just rename that one again. Track loop. So on tap hat, I'm just going to draw in, using this tool here, the draw tool, across the grid, some 16th notes. As you can see, it sets them all to one prefix volume, which I think is 100 on the MIDI scale. Not much groove there to begin with, so what we're going to do is change the velocity to add a bit of groove. And what we're going to do first, it's probably a similar trend here, as you can see, is I'm taking down the kick drum hit in each one of these loops just to give room for the kick drum to come through in trance. So it sounds like this. I'm not taking it out altogether because it gives it a nice bit of texture. And then these ones, I'm going to take those down as well. You probably see me do that on all the loops because it just kind of gives that kind of rolling, you know, nice driving sound. That's cool. And what we're going to do now is very simply go to the sampler again and just play around with the tuning. So So I've tuned that up a little bit. I don't think there's a need to add an envelope to that because it's a pretty sharp sound as it is. Maybe a bit of reverb. And there we go. That's our sampled hi-hat, and it's right there next to our loops that we sampled, and it's giving us that nice tight trance sound. Cool, that was part 4. Okay, part 5 is we're going to look at other single shot sounds like we did with the hi-hat, but more of like percussive sounds, and how we can get them into our track and tune them to make them work with the rest of the loops and the track itself. So let's go into our browser, let's go upper level and look at percussion sounds for sound slot 7. And let's go through them now. So let's see. I've actually used this one a couple of times myself before and I quite like this, so I'm going to stick this in now. And it actually does like a bit of a ring to it in a particular tune, I can't remember what that is exactly, but we're going to try and tune that against the rest of the track and our bass demo that we had from before to see if we can get this production working. So there's two ways of doing this. You can do this from the hardware and step them in yourself using the pads, or you can just draw them in here like so. Just double click in on these grids and create a rhythm. So there we go, that's our nice tap percussion sound. I'm just going to rename that Perk 1. And you can add as many of these in as you like. If you've got a vision for how they're going to be used in the arrangement, they might not be just over that amount of time. What you might have is, I'm just going to quickly delete that, you might have them over a greater period doing different things, so it might be a case of something like this. So you can do all kinds of things like that with it. So it's dead easy to tune this. So from the sampler menu for that Perk 1, pitch and envelope. And at this point, you might already have an idea for your track. So you might have a piano part or your bass or your lead or something, some sort of sound that you can use as a reference for this sound and indeed the rest of your percussion. In this case, we've got the demo bass. That sounds a touch flat to me compared to the bass. And just one semitone up, that sounds like it should be in the same key as that. Which is not bad. Also inside Maschine, something I can show you here for why we're looking at the Perk sound, is you can actually host third-party plugins. So it's got a range of internal effects like compressors, gates, transient masters, limiters, EQs, filters, delays. Delays are pretty good, but also you can host your own effects in here as well. So for example, I could jump in here, take an Echo Boy, which is one of my favorite plugins, and you get the controls here, so you can actually use the hardware to control this plugin. But what you can find is you can actually just double click on it, blow it up, and you'll get control here. I'm using the actual hardware right now to control these knobs, but you can still use these in here, or you can just jump straight in and use the plugin as you normally would do. So let's have a listen to what this sounds like. It's pretty cool. Simple 1/8 delay, a bit space echo maybe. And I did mention the LFO tool earlier. I've not completely abandoned it in this new method of working. You can actually add an LFO tool into here. So it's down here. And again, you can set up a sidechain type sound to help control the echo after this sound. We start to bring a bit of these in and do a bit of a mix. So Machine's actually got a mixer, so we can actually go through and mix these sounds with a bit more space. In here you've got the input outputs, the plugins that's being used. Just looks like your sequencer really. The auxiliaries, so the reverbs and such. And here we've got our Perk sound, tap hat, loop, other loops, kick clap. And then also from here you get quick access to your reverb as well. So if you wanted to, quickly just click on that, turn that up a bit. And there we have it. That was part 5, single shot hits. Part 6, adding further offbeat hi-hats and a ride cymbal to finish off the project. So you guys can add different loops into Maschine to your heart's content using the methods that I've shown you, and you can spend a long time tuning these, maybe adding EQs, filters, etc, etc, etc. But what I want to show you guys now is where I would reach for an open beat, offbeat hi-hat, sorry, and add that to the selection. So we've already got some quite hi-hat sounding things in here, so let's have a quick listen. That's a bit hi-hat-ish. We've got this tap hat here. But what we want is a nice big open hi-hat. So let's go to our browser for sound slot 8. And we're going to go to this folder, drum hits, open hats. And let's have a listen. Okay, I'm going to pick that one. I didn't really know what that was before. Not pre-selected it. I'm just going to drop that in there. Rename this open hat. And then draw in the MIDI notes, which for these would be off the offbeat of each of these bar markers, like so. And if you wanted to, you could adjust the velocity of these, but since it's a single track, we could jump straight into our mixer, have a listen to it. Set the volume. Add some reverb maybe. A little bit. Quite by a mixer. Now let's tune it a bit. Also, add an envelope if you wanted to. Okay, for sound slot 9, let's have a look for a ride cymbal. Let's go back to our browser, as we did before. I'm going to go with that one. I mean, it's not the cleanest sound, but it'll do for now. If you wanted to, because we're using the same rhythm as the hi-hat for this, just select that, hold down Alt, drag it below, it copies it straight in. Rename that ride, and there we go. And go straight away to our mixer, just get a volume for that. And as we've done with the other sounds, you might want to tune this. I'd usually spend a bit more time than that tuning drums, but I think just for the purpose of this example, you get the picture. So there we go. Maybe add a bit of reverb to that sound as well. Wanted to, could envelope it. I often find ride cymbals are something that is like just a little bit in the background, so they wouldn't take up too much of the foreground. And there we have it. That was part 6. Part 7. exporting the loops back into your sequencer. Now, we've done all this production on our loops in here. Let's say you guys have spent an extensive amount of time modifying your loops, chopping them up, adding really good hi-hats and everything, and getting your drum production as tight as you possibly can do using the tools I've shown you. The problem is it's still inside Maschine, and although it's free running, like you can drop that anywhere against your demo parts here, it's free running Maschine against any part of the Pro Tools sequencer. It's not actually in the session yet, it's still inside Maschine. So there's two things that you can think about here. The first one is you want to get them in there so you can do your full arrangement. But before that, you can go through and do all your other sound design on your other sounds and get them sounding pretty good before you commit to audio. So there may be some further tuning you need to do or further adjustments before dragging it into Pro Tools or your designated sequencer. For example, if you wanted to test against the bass, we've got our demo bass sound here. And that's how we do that. But let's say we're past that point, everything about our drums is sounding brilliant. How do we get them from here as MIDI into Pro Tools as audio loops? We can do a proper sequence. And it's easy. It's so easy, it's painfully easy. Like, it's unbelievably easy. And this is how you do it. All you need to do is use that button there, and it will create an audio file for that selection and drag it into the sequencer. If you wanted to, you could drag the whole thing, but obviously we're not going to do that. That's basically just giving us everything in the loop. We don't want that. All you need to do is solo sounds within Maschine. Press that. It quickly renders it, and it gives you that sound. All I need to do is solo. Click that. Put it there. Also, by the way, it's worth noting I muted the reverb because I don't want to commit to that reverb just yet. I want to use a reverb within Pro Tools later. So there we go. Click that there. Import to there. Solo. Export. I mean, this is like a 30-second job. There we go. Now, the only downside I can possibly see from using this method is that it does not name them as per the track that we used in Maschine. So it hasn't got, for example, ride cymbal there or any of the others. So you will just have to quickly go through, rename that. So that was kick, clap. What loop was that then? Sorry, I just had to jump back into here. Heavy loop, rolling loop, track loop. If you open up a Maschine, you can actually get the rename box up there. And that's Pro Tools, I'm sure you can do it in your other sequencer, but heavy loop. Okay, now I've muted Maschine and drawn a loop around this. The also good thing about Maschine is if there's any tails hanging over from the sounds, it doesn't cut them off. Like, it's actually still got the tail end of that open hat there. How you deal with that going forward by duplicating them is up to you. But now we're in Pro Tools. Just grab them all, turn them all down a little bit. And there we have it. That is how we convert our Maschine project into our Pro Tools project. Okay, the final part is part 8, and this is a real-world example of a drum set that I put together that's working in one of my new productions. And I wanted to mention at this point that the tutorial has been about the technique of how you manipulate samples using a sampler like Maschine by choosing envelopes and velocities and tuning and effects. But it's really not about how you exactly should make your music. You should take those skills and create your own crazy individual sound. Don't just go to the loops and sample packs that I've shown you. Although they're very good, you should really just be reaching out there and going making your own crazy sound from whatever samples you can find, whether that be old records, recording sounds from, you know, the real world, anywhere at all. You know, make sure that you're completely individual and just use the techniques that I've shown you to manipulate those and make them work in your track. So this is a drum set that I created recently for one of my tracks. It has the kick, which we discussed. The clap, I think, was used the same clap that we used in the tutorial. and then we're going to go through each individual loop. But before that, let's just listen to it all together. Okay, so I'm going to go through with you guys now each individual track and explain what's going on. So the first one is this sound here, which I've appropriately named Plonk, and it was a loop I think I took from another track, and I just basically took out the slices that I wanted to use. And I've turned the reverb off so you can see what it sounds like without it. And as you can hear, it's really dry, and the slices are really thin. I've really enveloped them quite sharply. If we just turn on the 16th grid, you can see that there's a lot of gap there, just to give that room to breathe. The reverb here is pretty cool, percussion reverb, which I designed just for this job. And it's really those top hits that this lower content provides some good texture sounds, but these two top hits here, that one with some reverb and without, just nice. And there's this one as well. So those two really stand out in the mix, and all I've got going on here is just a bit of EQ. Some high-end stuff and taking out a bit of low-end. So that's a really chunky part of this percussion set. The next one down, which I've called Rapper. Let's see what this sounds like. That's more of a classic trance loop. Again, that's been quite heavily enveloped. I'm going to take the reverb off that for you. And there is an offbeat hi-hat in there. It's a really short one. I'll show you guys now. There's that. These nice chunky textures. And what I've done to it is, first of all, I've kind of radio filtered it. So without this filter. And with it on. Bit of stereo imaging just to bring it into the middle. Didn't want anything going out too wide in the stereo field. Touch of EQ from the middle. And this is a really interesting plugin which I've got recently, which basically just some guy, I think he just made it on his computer, and he's basically emulated what sound would sound like if it was recorded to cassette today. So this is a cassette emulation, and it just basically gives it a nice bit of drive. Gives it a nice bit of character, and then we've got some side chaining going on. Only a little bit. So all together with the reverb and all the effects, it works well with this plonk sound as well. It's got quite a techno feel to it, and I kind of feel like one of the slices will fill in where the other slice isn't in the other track, and I've kind of designed it that way, so then you've got a nice rolling percussion where there's a good balance of sounds where they're not overlapping each other. So with the kick and clap. Moving on to this one, thick loop. So this is a lower end loop, processed in a pretty similar way to the last one. I'll play it for you. Quite thick with hi-hats this one. There's no reverb on it. And again, I'm using the saturation tool and a bit of EQ and side chaining. It seems like a bit of a paradox we should discuss here, where the saturation is bringing back what the envelope took away. And you probably think it's like doing it, you know, sending it one direction just to bring it back in the other. And I don't know why I do. I just feel like I have more control over this, and I can dial in how much of the tails I bring in with this saturation, rather than leaving it just as a raw loop and having no control over, say, how long these slices are. Because obviously when I put this tune together, I decided how long these loops would be, and I just added these little touches at the end just to kind of brighten it up or darken it up, just to make the whole section work together. Moving on to this next one. This one's got just a bit of EQ and some reverb. There's quite a lot of emphasis on the first beat of this one. There's a nice tap, and then there's an offbeat. And as per machine demo, you can see I've turned down these other ones. It gives a lot of pace to the section. And this one's a bit of a lighter sound. These ones are not quite as low, these last two. So you can see that I've added some velocity data to that. Once it's been rendered out of Maschine, you can see that the loader sections of this are the ones which had higher velocities, and these ones are the lower sounds. You've got a bit more side chaining just to emphasize that as well. Just a little touch. And this is just a selection of EQs from a fancy EQ box I dig out every now and again. Moving on to this one. This one was another loop which I naughtily stole from somewhere else. I'm not going to tell you where, but yeah, it sounds like this without the plugins on. I just like those really weird sounds, the glitch sounds. This one. I just find that really fascinating. I think that's good texture. And then there's a bit of EQ, just rolling off some of the bottom end. Stereo images just to bring it a bit more into the middle. And then sidechain and reverb. And then the last one, good old open hi-hat. I've actually rendered this down with a bit of reverb on it. So, I mean, all it was before was literally just the open hi-hat I chose. I'd tuned it, made it work with the rest of the track, and just added a bit of reverb. So altogether, they sound like this. A plonk loop, wrap loop, thick hats, tidy little loop, tight loop. I mean, you can't really hear this one, but it just adds a little bit like high-end texture. And that glitchy sound as well. Now it's good to mention that at this point, now I've got all my drums in one place and I'm happy with the way they sound, then you can start to add effects and automation, and as you're working your track and bringing in bass parts and other synth parts, you know, you can do different things like filtering and effects to introduce along the way. So, you know, once you've got them, I kind of tend to say try and get everything right in one place first, like a section like this. And in a real world example, you'd have the bass sounds and all the synth sounds as well together here. Make it all work, and then you can start to do your arrangement as I have done with this tune. I've hidden the rest of the tune because this is actually going to be one of my next singles, which you'll hear very soon. But you guys get a look at the drums early on. Some of the things I've got in here, I've got a flanged snare sound. I've used battery for this, and this basically, I automate a flanger on here, and this one is free, this Blue Cat flanger. You get this free from the Blue Cat website, and basically just automated the delay to give it a nice bit of movement. And that can go along with the transitions. I actually have battery set up here to do a duplication of the kick, and I've got various different filters on it. That's not a filter. Various different filters on it which automate over time. So as you can see, you can use the various tools that we showed you in the video to create some dynamics in the track. And the last thing I wanted to show you was something actually from a completely different sampler, which you could resample into Maschine or not, but it's basically like an example of how you can use a different sampler to do similar thing to what we did. And this sound is from Stylus RMX, which is a really old module. I think I've had this module like, I don't know, maybe 2004 or something like that. And it's just got some really good textured like ethnic drums and like, you know, real world stuff which you can sample into your tracks. And it sounds like this, so keep an eye on this little roll here. So as we had in the, just not the echo off, as we had in the Maschine window where we could automate and change the envelopes and the arrangement of the piano roll, it's the same story here. So what this allows you to do is select one of these amazing sound menus, and basically just take the MIDI file and decide which parts of it you want. So I'm going to show you guys what the loop sounds like in full. And basically, as you can see from the piano roll, I just wanted to take the top bit from here, and I could hear something in that which would make a really good roll, and it ended up sounding like this. I think that's pretty cool. From there, I did a bit of enveloping within the instrument. So use a bit of this amp envelope here, similar to what we did in Maschine. And then I've also got distortion, and then a bit of filtering as well. At various points there's a filter which acts upon this as an automation, and as you could hear before, really long echo. And reverb, and that gives a really nice fill. So, you know, keep your eyes and ears open for various sounds in different romplers and instruments which you can pick up. But like I said earlier on at the very first start of this tutorial, the principles that we learned about using Maschine can apply to that instrument, because just the same, it has an envelope, it has a piano roll where you can choose which parts of the loop you want to use, and you can rearrange it and make it your own. And there we have it. This is a real world example of a finished section of drums within one of my tracks. I hope you guys have learned a lot from this. I hope you guys have found this valuable and can look at drum production in a completely different way now and make some really cool original sounding drums without just reaching for, you know, sample part loops. You can use the skills that you've learned in this video to completely change however you want your drums to sound, flip it on its head and make something completely original. Take care guys, and I'll make another tutorial video for you guys very soon. Cheers, bye!